possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So this week I saw this very disturbing story uh, out of Baltimore, out of my town where I live right now, about this young kid who shot and killed a 40-year-old guy, and he also robbed this person, and he injured another person, shot and injured another person. And now this kid faces, possibly a juvenile sentence. If he's sentenced as a juvenile, he will be incarcerated until he turns 21. If he's charged as an adult, he may face life sentence or another long sentence. So I just want to share my thoughts about this whole situation. This whole situation just is another reminder of many of the problems that plague the city of Baltimore and many problems that just plague the black community. Here in Baltimore, for the past 5 years, over 300 people have been murdered. And unfortunately, there has been a complete failure to address the problem of violence in this city. A failure on the part of the city government, a failure on the part of the state government, a failure of the community, and a failure of families. And that's what we have in this situation. We have a failure on the family level. I mean, how do you raise a kid who at the age of 13 is already robbing and killing people? Anytime you have a child that has engaged in that kind of activity, obviously there has been a failure in the home. The mother failed to raise that kid, failed to raise him, did a horrible job raising the kid, because there's no way in hell that a good parent would have a kid that young engaged in that kind of activity if they did a good job as a parent. And no matter what kind of circumstances somebody lives in, if they're poor, if their family raises them with values, they won't be out here robbing people and killing people at the age of 13. So this question, this problem that we see is larger than some public policy issue. It's about the family as well, about the failure of the family to raise the children, man. We failed our children, man. And then, not only the mother, because more likely than not, unfortunately, this kid was probably raised in a single parent household, but the fault, so the burden is on the mother, unfortunately, to be the one to raise the kid. And unfortunately, this mother obviously did a horrible job raising this kid. And more likely than not, you probably had a situation where the father was absent. And, just because somebody's in a single parent household, I'm not going to say that that's going to be cause them to be violent, cause them to be a criminal, because there are plenty of people that are raised in single parent households that live productive and positive lives. But this is just an example of a failure of parents to raise their kids. And more likely than not, the father was probably completely absent from this kid's life. And as a result of that, when you don't have a strong male role model, unfortunately, a lot of our young people are guided towards um, people in the neighborhood to raise them up, people in the neighborhood to teach them about what it means to be a man. And unfortunately, a lot of those people that they turn to for male leadership or, for role models and all that kind of stuff, unfortunately, a lot of them are engaged in criminal activity. So they perceive manhood as being about, being engaged in this criminal activity. And a lot of times people see going to jail as some kind of rites of passage or something, some kind of sick, twisted concept of a rites of passage. That's, and that speaks to another issue that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. So you have a complete failure of the family in this situation and in many situations where you had these young people already engaged in criminal, destructive behavior. And then not only is this a failure of the family, this is a failure of the community. Because unfortunately, we have lost any kind of sense of community today. Like, I remember growing up as a kid, everybody knew everybody in the neighborhood. Everybody's parents looked out for everybody's kids. So your parents weren't just the people in your household. Your parents were your friends' parents and parents in the neighborhood. They looked after you. They put you in check if you were doing something wrong. They would check you and discipline you if you were engaged in bad conduct and stuff like that. I remember neighbors telling my mother, about things that I had done and stuff like that, and my mother checking me. And I've seen other situations as well like that. So you had a sense of community. But nowadays, everybody turns their a blind eye to this stuff. They don't want to be involved in stuff. They don't want to check people. They don't want to intervene when they see bad conduct. They're afraid of the kids. Instead of checking these kids and telling them how they need to behave, a lot of these people in the community are afraid of the kids. And a lot of these parents are trifling. They don't want somebody correcting their kids or disciplining their kids. And that's the part of the reason why we see a lot of these problems plaguing our communities, where you have situations like this, where these kids are engaged in criminal activity, robbing people, killing people, selling drugs, using drugs. It's just an absolute disaster. And we need to take charge. I mean, it's like nowadays, it's like a every man for himself type mentality. This whole not snitching culture is a cancer that's destroying our community. And it's not, when I'm talking about the not snitching culture, it's not just about not talking to the police about issues, but it's about not even going to people's parents and talking about the things that their children are doing in the community. So it's like a lack of community, a lack of a sense of oneness or, working together. It's a lack of any kind of sense of collective responsibility. And that's why you have situations like this, unfortunately. A lot of times in these communities, the community people don't even speak to each other. They just go about their own individual lives, living their lives, and not even working as a collective. So you have situations like this, where a kid at 13 is already robbing and killing people. Out on the street, like a lot of times when you go on these streets, you see young kids out here selling drugs. Young kids that should be in school selling drugs. Young kids that had a potential to do all kinds of great things, but that potential is stifled and destroyed, and their lives are destroyed like this kid. So again, this is a failure on the part of the community. It's a failure on the part of the political leadership in Baltimore and in the state. Here you have all these murders that take place here. And I'm not saying that these elected officials are sincere, but they have failed to put this situation in control, to control this violence that's plaguing this city. Anytime you have over 300 murders for the past 5 years, that is an example of a failure, a complete failure in leadership, man. A failure to address this problem. It is an example of a failure of the police commissioner, to do his job to address the violence that's plaguing our city. It's a failure on the part of these political leaders. Because they have failed to get this violence under control. They have failed to deal with the root causes of the violence, like the poverty and like the inadequate education that a lot of our young people are receiving in Baltimore. Baltimore City has like some of the lowest, test scores when it comes to the children, in terms of just having the basic skills. It's a complete failure. And when you lack a quality education, what do you end up doing? You end up engaging in criminal activity. When you lack job opportunities, you end up engaging in criminal activity. And that's what we see. We have whole areas of Baltimore City where there are open air drug markets and not a damn thing is being done to close those drug markets. Where you have young people all hours of the day and night on corners selling drugs. And many times it's right in front of the police, and the police do absolutely nothing to shut it down. In fact, I'm sure that some of those police take a cut from those drug trades that are going on because they're obviously not trying to shut it down because they sit right in front of it and watch it happen right in their face. So this is what we're dealing with. You know, these failing schools, lack of opportunity, poverty, and you got a governor that's not really dealing with these issues as well. So yeah, this is just a crisis type of situation. One thing we need to do is have more mentor programs so that our young people have guidance. Perhaps if this young person had a positive role model in his life, a positive male role model in his life, perhaps, you know, his life could have went in a different direction. Perhaps he wouldn't be out here uh, robbing people and killing people. If he had a man in his life to tell him, you know, about what it means to be a man, to guide him, to educate him, to inspire him, not just with words, but with a living example. You know, too often, you know, these OGs that these young people look up to are people that are criminals, you know, people that are drug dealers, people that are thugs and gangsters and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't help when we have a whole music industry that glorifies violence, that glorifies, you know, selling drugs and using drugs and shooting people and all that kind of stuff, glorifies going to jail. And it's so, things are so distorted that a lot of these young people think that going to jail is like some kind of rites of passage. Well, something needs to be done, and I hope this new mayor, Brandon Scott, actually does something to get this violence under control. I really do. You know, and I know that he was on the city council for quite some time, and on his watch, you still had all this violence. So I hope that this situation moves in a different direction. So those are my thoughts about this. You know, it's just a horrible situation. A young person at this, you know, at 13, already killing people, already robbing people, and now his life is basically thrown away, completely thrown away. You know, maybe if he gets a juvenile sentence, perhaps he can redeem himself and turn his life around. And it's just a shame that a lot of people end up being educated or something when they get in jail. You know, it's like, why can't you learn the lessons before something like that happens? But anyway, man, those are my thoughts about this. Tell me what you all think. Please rate, comment, subscribe. Like the video, share the video, hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content on here. Peace and blessings. And I want to hear from you. What do you think needs to be done to address the problem of violence, not only in Baltimore, but around this country? Peace.